2012 was an incredibly influential year for popular music, with several notable events that changed how the world saw the charts. Artists like Lana Del Rey planted the seeds for the modern 2010s sound. Songs like Gangnam Style redefined the concept of chart success in the social media age, and more importantly for our case, the year as a whole was defined by an unprecedented explosion in indie music topping the charts. Artists like Gautier, Neon Trees, and the Lumineers had their own massive, and in some cases only, hits that year, and they all challenged what we thought modern pop music could sound like at the time. One band who rode this wave was Fun, an indie rock band who burst onto the scene with a few massive hits that February and have become synonymous with the sound of that year. But even with how huge they were back then, they've left a surprisingly small impact on the industry as a whole. Only one of the band's members has the same, if not more, influence than before the group ceased to be, and the overall trend of unknown artists getting hits of this scale from the year was unfortunately short-lived. Fun had made the third biggest song of 2012, and some of my personal favorite songs of this era, so I was curious where this band came from, and where the group went after their short time in the spotlight. Our story begins with Nathaniel Joseph Ruess, born on February 26, 1982 in Iowa City. Music was only loosely connected to his family, with Nate's biggest influence at that point being his uncle, who was a Broadway performer. Ruess's family moved to Glendale, Arizona in 1986, where he would stay for the rest of his adolescence. In that time, he would perform in several short-lived punk bands started by his peers in school, which gave him enough experience and motivation to pursue music professionally after graduation. Some of these bands we only know the name of, like This Past Year, but the one early act that went the farthest was Never Gonna Score, formed in 1999 with longtime friend Sam Means. Never Gonna Score would only release a single EP, The Byron Sessions. Upon listening, you can tell this is early into Ruess's singing career, with his voice sounding amateur and inexperienced.
Why is it bad things always happen? Why is it about girls who I just can't see?
Some discussions of a record deal were had, but nothing came of it, and Never Gonna Score would be shelved. After graduating in 2000, the duo would begin a new project, The Format, and unlike the previous bands, this one picked up some steam. Their debut EP, pretentiously titled EP, would release in August of 2002. Their first single, titled with equal pretentiousness, got heavy rotation from radio stations in Phoenix, which eventually led them to signing with Elektra Records that same year. Their debut album under the label, Interventions and Lullabies, released on October 21st, 2003, and gained them significant local popularity. Elektra Records would be bought out by Warner Brothers and merged with Atlantic Records in March of 2004. Many artists would be lost or dropped in the transfer, but The Format was fortunately spared, although it was obvious Atlantic didn't consider them a priority. The band would mainly tour throughout the rest of 2004, sharing the stage with acts like Yellow Card, Hello Goodbye, and most notably Steel Train, another recently successful act led by one Jack Michael Antonoff, who we'll get back to. The Format would release a new EP titled Snails in April 2005 to sell on tour, and began working on their second full album. However, Atlantic would drop The Format in November for what amounted to creative differences, which hindered the album's production. 2 months before its official release, the full album would be leaked online. The band quickly made the album available early on their website store to cut back on damages, and so The Format's second album, Dog Problems, was released unexpectedly on May 19th and officially on July 11th, 2006. The Format as a whole showcased Ruess's improvement as a singer, and Dog Problems specifically would solidify the musical style he flourished in, with influences from 70s pop and rock, as well as Broadway musicals.
There's no sense in complaining. It doesn't change our minds. Take me by the hand, let's compromise.
Despite now being independent and the impromptu conditions of the release, Dog Problems was the Format's most successful album, with it selling over 170,000 copies and receiving huge praise from several major publications. The band would perform on Carson Daly a few times and headline several big tours from 2006 through to 2008, crossing paths with the All-American Rejects, Gusto, Steel Train Again, and another important act, Antonoff. Ruess would recruit their recently departed multi-instrumentalist Andrew Dost as a member of the tour band, and don't worry, we're getting there. Despite Dog Problems' popularity, it would unfortunately be the Format's cultural peak and their final project. Work on a third album did begin, going far enough for early versions of songs to be played at their final shows.
This is a song that right now, just for right now, we're gonna call it Benson Hedges.
But on February 4th, 2008, the band was formally announced to be on indefinite hiatus. They posted on their website that Ruess and Means were still on good terms, but they had no plans on making new music under the format title. Despite this loss, Ruess saw this as an opportunity to expand his music vision, and to work with new people. Quickly after the announcement, he asked Jack Antonoff and Andrew Dost if they were interested in forming a new band, to which they both gladly accepted. Antonoff initially had a more negative relationship with Ruess after meeting him on tour with Steel Train, but developed a friendship after a few days on the road. Dost had minimal connections with either members outside of touring, but Ruess and him had a mutual admiration for each other's talent, and connected by their shared love of show tunes. All three expressed how their individual skills added new depth to the project they wouldn't have had with previous bands, and they were already beginning to build some solid creative chemistry. The band found a good rhythm of Ruess writing lyrics and giving ideas for melodies, and Dost and Antonoff building music to accompany it, or vice versa. The name Fun came when, during talks of what the band should be called, Antonoff suggested Ice Cream, which was immediately dismissed by the others. The idea did bring some positive mental imagery, which the band was more responsive towards, so they bluntly chose the name Fun to express those as simply as possible. The stylization of lowercase with a period came when they were contacted by a Finnish noise rock band also named Fun, who were worried that fact would cause confusion. The band altered their name to be respectful, but a quick Google search shows it didn't help the issue that much in hindsight. A week after officially forming, the trio flew out to New Jersey for their first brainstorming session together in Antonoff's parents' living room. The band's first demo, a newer version of the unused format song Benson Hedges, would be released a few months later, being downloadable from a Spin article announcing the formation of the band. They would gain more initial attention opening for Jack's Mannequin on a tour through that November, performing mainly demos and covers. Now the foundation for the band was set, and with half a year's worth of ideas and demos under their belt, the last step was finally producing their debut album. Recording for the album began in fall of 2008, and Ruess appointed Stephen McDonald, who had also worked on the format's Dog Problems, to produce it. Not many stories came out of the album's production, and the rollout for it would be pretty straightforward. The band's MySpace page said the album would release in spring of 2009, which would later be specified as August, in tandem with announcing that fans could download the album's first single, At Least I'm Not As Sad As I Used to Be, through the band's newsletter. Fun would spend most of the meantime on a co-headlining tour with Manchester Orchestra from April to June, with the other singles releasing throughout. And finally, on August 25th, 2009, Fun's debut album Aim and Ignite was released. Aim and Ignite takes the Broadway and Queen inspirations from Dog Problems and cranks them up to an infectiously theatrical degree, in part from McDonald's production being able to handle the band's ambition. It would later be revealed that many of the tracks were repurposed ideas from the scrapped third format album, which would explain their stylistic similarities. The album topically mainly focuses on Ruess looking back at his past and the sacrifices it took to get where he is, with lyrics referencing the breakup of the format and reflecting on his over 10 years as a musician. Some songs also addressed the struggles of Ruess's parents, like in The Gambler and a scrapped track titled Jumping the Shark.
I know I let you down, and though you say these days are happy, why's the power out, and I'm fucked up.
The latter was played occasionally at shows after the album's release, but was never released under Fun officially. Critics were very positive of the album and praised the band's lyricism and varied, grandiose arrangements, although some claimed it was overproduced and fell into the cheesier parts of their inspirations at times. The album would peak at number 20 on the alternative albums charts, 71 on the overall album charts, and the band would win awards for the music video for the song All the Pretty Girls. The band even got the highest form of praise by having the single Walking the Dog used in an Expedia commercial. However, this critical success didn't translate into good performance commercially, as the album had mediocre sales and all the singles failed to chart. Despite this, the band was proud of what they accomplished on the album, with Dost stating that it's the album that we had all hoped we were capable of making. The rest of 2009 and 2010 for Fun was focused on touring. The biggest event from these would be in April of 2010 when they opened for Paramore during a high point in their own popularity. 4 months later, the band would post on their website that they're entering the studio to make a second album, while also officially announcing that they had been signed to a major label, Fueled by Ramen. According to Ruess, the head of the label had been occasionally contacting them to negotiate a deal for years, as far back as before the format. Ruess had been apprehensive about major labels both due to Atlantic's treatment of the format and from a fear of tarnishing the creative freedom of being an independent band, though he had also been proud of watching Fueled by Ramen grow to where it is while maintaining their morals, and the higher-ups at the label had mutual admiration, going as far as personally buying tickets to their shows. So the second album by Fun would officially be released under their label, and only time told how lucrative a decision this would be. The band had been writing songs and making demos consistently while on tour. The idea for the second album would still have the inspirations of the previous, but during that time Nate Ruess had become obsessed with hip-hop and used it as more inspiration for the album's sound. In particular, he became a huge fan of Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which had released that November.
Let's have a toast for the douchebags. Let's have a toast for the assholes. Let's have a toast for the scumbags. Every one of them that I know.
So if they were inspired by it and other hip-hop albums, then it was obvious they needed to get a hip-hop producer to work on the album. The even more obvious choice would be to try and get a producer from the Kanye album. Jeff Basker, who worked on several songs on Dark Fantasy as well as a prolific catalog of other artists, was initially apprehensive to work with the band. He had only worked with hip-hop and R&B artists in the past, even being in production of songs from Beyoncé's album 4 at the time, so he felt a moderately successful alt-rock band wasn't something he wanted to work with. Basker had previously cancelled meetings with the band, so as a last-ditch attempt, Ruess met up with him at his hotel in New York in February of 2011. Basker was still cynical to start off with, but became intrigued after hearing Ruess explain his vision of combining rock with hip-hop elements. He then invited Ruess to his hotel room and played him some rough cuts of songs, including an instrumental rejected from Kanye West and Jay-Z's album Watch the Throne. Ruess, admittedly tipsy at the time, began singing the chorus to a song they had written called We Are Young, which Basker was immediately struck with. So much so, he invited the band to his studio to flesh out the song. The next day, they came to his studio, and over the next month, reworked the Kanye instrumental and produced what was essentially the final cut of the song. The choice of it being a collaboration with Janelle Monáe came from her being close friends with Basker, and for the band being fans of Monáe's latest album at the time, Arcandroid. The band's initial choice for the part was Rihanna, who was allegedly sent the song and enjoyed it, but eventually fell through because I'd imagine Rihanna in 2011 had a lot on her plate. All parties involved were proud of the finished product, and the band considered We Are Young to be the perfect centerpiece for the new album's sound. Fun's first release for this album cycle would be a single in collaboration with Panic at the Disco titled Come On in May of 2011. Fun had opened for them on a tour earlier in the year, yet only built a close relationship through the recording sessions for the song. Come On only saw a limited release, and is largely forgotten by casual fans of both bands. The first single for the new album, appropriately We Are Young, would release on September 20th, 2011, to modest fanfare initially. On November 11th, the album's titled Some Nights and a release date of February 21st, 2012 was revealed. By all accounts, this album's release seemed to be average for a band of their size, but something surprising would happen just months before. We Are Young would begin to see building radio play that December and would debut on the Billboard charts at number 53. This was because the song was covered on the musical drama Glee on the 8th episode of its 3rd season.
I'll carry you home tonight.
The show's music supervisor, PJ Bloom, was hesitant to put the song in the show when given it, considering it would be the first time they would cover a song without knowing if it would be successful on its own. But allegedly, after a single listen, he liked it so much he immediately sent the song to the show's creators. It's since become the 6th highest charting Glee cover of all time, and the episode is widely considered the event that gave Fun their initial push into the mainstream. A later event to impact the song would be on February 5th, 2 weeks before the album's release, release, when the song was used in a Chevrolet Super Bowl commercial. Many songs were considered for the ad, but once again, after hearing it a single time, Chevy's lead creative director Andrew Dost knew it would be the perfect choice. The song would steadily climb the Hot 100 in the weeks following, and on March 7th, 2012, We Are Young became the #1 most popular song in America, and remained there for over a month. To celebrate the song's growing popularity, the band decided to release the album digitally a week early, so the second album by Fun, Some Nights, would release worldwide on February 21st, 2012. Some Nights continues the bombastic energy from Aim and Ignite, but with both a more ambitious and more accessible sound. The inclusion of Jeff Basco on production was able to ground the band's theatrics in reality, while also using the larger resources available to bring the scope of the record to fruition. The Kanye influences are very obvious in some spots, especially on tracks like It Gets Better, with its booming snares and abrasive vocal processing.
Like starlight crashing through the ruins of feathers. Yes, I know it hurts at first, but it gets better.
The album's production is frankly more hit or miss than on the previous, but the highs of this album are much higher as well, and were definitely ahead of their time. Hip-hop infused rock wasn't a new concept before Some Nights, but it was this album and this year that arguably proved its viability in the pop music landscape. The subject matter is also more varied, albeit with lyrics that are less outwardly personal to Nate Ruess's life, due to making the album more pop-friendly. The songs in the second half of Some Nights are widely considered to be weaker than the singles, but the album overall has stood the test of time as a pop music milestone. Commercially, the album did amazing, with it debuting third on the Billboard album charts and selling 70,000 copies in its first week, with it now having sold over 2 million copies and getting certified 3 times platinum. The record's biggest hit, We Are Young, became the first major label debut for a band to top the charts since Nickelback in 2001, as well as selling over 6 million copies overall, and being the only song to have over 300,000 sales every week for 7 consecutive weeks in the chart's history. The other major singles would also perform well, with the title track peaking at number 3 and Carry On at number 20. However, this financial success didn't translate into good performance critically, as views of the album are mixed among reviewers. Publications who were introduced to Fun through this album praised it for its execution of its melting pot of influences and Ruess's songwriting, while sites that had praised the previous album thought focusing on the pop side of the band took away from the elements gained from their rock influence, while also admitting the issues they had with Aim and Ignite were mostly resolved. After the success of Some Nights, Fun would immediately see worldwide attention and acclaim. The band would attend the 2013 Grammy Awards that February, where they would perform Carry On while being drenched in rain for what is likely their most iconic live performance. They were also nominated for Record of the Year and won Song of the Year for We Are Young and Best New Artist, which is ironic considering how much we've talked about. They would also perform a cover of Queen's Somebody to Love with Queen themselves at the iHeartRadio Music Festival that November. They then released their only official live EP, Before Shane Went to Bangkok, featuring performances of songs from both albums, as well as a then unreleased track called What the Fuck.
I broke into your room, I tried on all your clothes and I read every note. So what the fuck?
Fun at this point had a lot of momentum, but much like the format, their second and biggest album would be their final project. The last single from Fun would come on March 11th, 2014 with the song Sight of the Sun. It was initially written to be included in Some Nights, but was begrudgingly shelved due to the chorus containing an uncleared sample. That was until it was reworked and released after the creator of the HBO dramedy Girls asked the band to make a song for the show. The final release overall would be an EP on April 19th, 2014, filled with demo recordings from Aim and Ignite. But after this EP, nothing new ever came out of the band. There was talk about working on a third album throughout 2014, though only vaguely and with no estimate of how long it would take. The only idea of what the third album might have entailed at the time would be on June 18th, 2014, when the band would perform a new song on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon titled Harsh Lights.
Sipping into midnight under harsh light, and nothing gets me down.
The This would also be the band's final television appearance. With announcements slowing and tours ending, on February 4th, 2015, Fun would officially announce that the band was on indefinite hiatus. They posted on their website that Ruess, Antonoff, and Dost were still on good terms, but they had no plans on making new music under the Fun title. The reason given was that the members were prioritizing their individual solo ventures, and more specifically, Nate Ruess thought the songs he was writing would work better if attached on an album in his own name. Ruess would admit in interviews that this decision was poorly communicated to the other members, and they apparently didn't take the news too well. Although there were always rumors of a comeback, none of the members have shown a strong interest in reuniting. They had their big break and then disappeared a few years later, which confused most of the newly introduced audience. This has led many out of the loop to ask what happened to the members since this announcement. Andrew Dost has been relatively silent since the band's hiatus, only popping up occasionally with new work. He had released a solo album in 2009, and in 2015 he told interviewers that he was close to finishing a second. In April of 2016, he performed 2 new songs, Where Did We Go and Young Republicans, at the 25th Detroit Music Awards, but none of these songs have been released officially, and there's been no new news of the second album. Most of Dost's work has been behind the scenes, scoring soundtracks for movies and TV. The first and biggest project he's been a part of was the Jack Black and James Marsden comedy The D Train, which was released on May 8th, 2015 to critical mediocrity and financial failure. He's worked on other industry-level media, but he rarely takes the spotlight or headlines any projects. Outside of creating, Dost is now a teacher at the Interlochen Center for the Arts, which appears to be his current full-time commitment. Overall, Andrew Dost hasn't done a lot after Fun, but what he has done seems to be personally fulfilling at the very least. One could argue that Jack Antonoff has had the most prolific career since the band's end. He would release the first single from a new project under the name The Bleachers in 2014. He had been writing songs from his laptop for a year before while on tour with Fun, and kept it a relative secret until the song I Wanna Get Better would release on February 18th, along with a website complete with tour dates. He clarified in interviews that The Bleachers wasn't meant as a replacement for Fun, but after their hiatus and with Steel Train being inactive since 2013, it became his main personal creative outlet. The Bleachers' first album, Strange Desire, would release on July 11th, 2014, and debuted at number 11 on Billboard's album charts. The Bleachers has amassed a cult following in the 9 years it's been active. None of its singles were big on the mainstream charts, but have landed consistently high on the alternative charts, and the band is critically praised overall. Though The Bleachers is Antonoff's personal baby, he's likely more acclaimed today for his work behind the scenes, as ever since Fun released Some Nights he's been writing and producing with several big-name artists. He had been writing sporadic one-off songs with people like Carly Rae Jepsen and Sarah Bareilles from late 2012 to mid-2013, but would then develop a powerful friendship with singer-songwriter Taylor Swift. They had met through working on the song Sweeter Than Fiction from the soundtrack to the September 2013 film One Chance. They formed such a connection through this that Taylor let him write and produce songs for every album of hers released afterwards. Outside of Taylor, he has produced Lord's most critically acclaimed album, Melodrama, and her least critically acclaimed album, Solar Power. He also produced the last 3 albums from Lana Del Rey, and other hits for people like Olivia Rodrigo, Pink, and several others. From the connections he's made to the success of his personal work, Jack Antonoff has left a significant impact on music since Fun's disbandment. Sam Means was largely absent from Fun's story, but I figured I should mention his history after the Format's breakup here as well. Soon after the band's hiatus, Means founded the company Hello Merch in order to give bands more artistic freedom with selling merchandise while on tour. Hello Merch would then become the main merchandise distributors for Fun and Steel Train. The company has since expanded to its own clothing line and even its own record label. In terms of music, he would join a new act in early 2009, a long-distance collaboration between Stray Run's Michelle DeRosa and Sean Cooper, as well as other members of other groups, to form a new band called Destry. He's also worked on original material such as several EPs, singles, and one full-length album in January 2016 titled 10 Songs, which featured work from every previous member from the production on Dog Problems, excluding Nate Ruess. There's more information after this point, but to go further into his recent history, let's first take a look at the man of the hour, the lead singer. Nate Ruess has had a commendable career as a solo artist. Alongside the third Fun album, he had been working on ideas of songs for his debut solo album. This record, titled Grand Romantic, was released on July 16, 2015, and contained a few songs that were previously considered and even had demos recorded for both Some Nights and the third album, including an official release of Harsh Light and the lead single Nothing Without Love, as well as the track It Only Gets Much Worse, which went as far as having a writing credit to Andrew Dost. Grand Romantic was also produced by Jeff Basker, so both of these facts let the album retain a lot of the style from Some Nights with more of a focus on Ruess's songwriting ability. But what it didn't retain from Some Nights was success, with it receiving poor sales figures and mixed reviews. Nevertheless, this album would be the debut and to this day only notable release from Ruess's solo career. The closest thing to a new major release would be a scrapped punk rock EP first shown off in August of 2020 and tentatively slated for early 2021, but ultimately abandoned due to personal and pandemic complications. Since then, and in general, there's been nothing new solely from Ruess. The bulk of his later history has been writing and performing with other artists. His first featured artist credit after Some Nights would be Only Love by Anthony Green in January of 2012, and the biggest of his features would come in February of 2013 with the release of Just Give Me a Reason by Pink. Ruess was initially only a co-writer, but Pink thought the song would work better as a duet, which Nate agreed to despite being hesitant on doing duets in the past. This decision would lead to a song that spent 15 weeks in the Billboard Top 10, peaking at number 1, selling over 4 million copies and becoming the 7th best-selling song of 2013. Another notable Nate Ruess feature would be the Eminem song Headlights, also in 2013. Not as big a hit as the previous, but it would be an important track for Eminem's career, with it being the end of the feud between him and his mother. Before the song was given to Eminem, it was actually an attempt to make a studio version of the unreleased Jumping the Shark, which explains why the final song borrows many of its lyrics.
I know I let you down, and though you say the days are happy, why is the power off, and I'm fucked up and...
Also, unrelated, I just want you to know that he also sang the chorus on a song from the Gym Class Heroes titled Holy Horse Shit, Batman. I swear it's actually a really good song. Outside of features, he co-wrote several hits like Kesha's Die Young and High Road, Pink's Walk Me Home, and Zed's Stay the Night featuring Hayley Williams, although the latter and another song by Antonoff was written under the alias Benjamin Eli Hanna. These songs and more were able to get him an award from the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2015. And to drive home his cultural impact, he would also be a part of the Hamilton mixtape in 2016, providing backing vocals on a cover of My Shot featuring Busta Rhymes. Most important events featuring Ruess would slow until January of 2020, when a new Instagram account for the format was created, and on the 21st they would make a post announcing that a concert film from a 2007 performance at the Mayan Theater would be re-releasing both on vinyl and streaming services. This got fans excited as the film was only initially a DVD with a very limited release. They also announced a viewing party for the movie on February 3rd inside the Hello Merch warehouse. But when fans arrived, they were shocked to see it was instead a full acoustic performance from Ruess and Means, where they also announced an official reunion tour. It was initially scheduled for March 2020, but was pushed back due to the pandemic, first to July 2020, then July 2021, and most recently March 2022. Despite these delays, the reunion was a welcome surprise for old fans of the band, and it even brought some hope that another project from Ruess's would get a similar treatment in the future. Every member of Fun now has lucrative and comfortable careers in the music industry, and although any success is good in the eyes of those who follow them, some fans from every era of their careers are still disappointed that their paths haven't aligned again. The best answer as to why Fun ended is that after they became musical celebrities, they prioritized working on things that fulfilled their personal creativities, instead of using that inspiration to essentially make Some Nights 2, and those personal journeys tended to not bring them either together or in the spotlight in general. On the more speculative side, there were a few interview clips and tweets from the members that indicate some undisclosed event took place that tore the band apart, most commonly between Ruess and Antonoff, who have already had a rocky relationship. No matter the validity of this rumor, it's obvious that none of the members have immediate plans to reunite anytime soon. Some Nights is fondly remembered today as a defining release for the year and the decade, and even the earlier, more overlooked work from them and other bands is still solid in indie rock. Fun's full story tells an interesting narrative of a band reaching an impressive peak culturally despite all that came before and what they became afterwards. Speaking personally, the hits from Some Nights are some of my favorite songs from this time, and although I have mixed feelings on the album overall, it does hold a certain fondness in my heart due to my nostalgia for this era of music. Fun to me always seemed like the kind of band where once you discovered them, you would be curious as to what led to their cultural peak, but I was shocked to find that whenever the story was being told, it was usually just they formed, and they made We Are Young, and then they broke up. So a part of me making this video is just to show that there is more history and nuance between these big moments. But anyways, and finally, this was pretty much the whole history of the band Fun. I consider this video more of a passion project, so it might be a little different from the ones that I usually make. I prioritized information over anything else, so I'm sure my next videos are going to be business as usual, but I just wanted to share the unsung story of one of the biggest bands of the early 2010s. But this video is now over, you've seen the story, so be sure to like the video if you enjoyed what I was saying, and be sure to subscribe if you want me to say more things. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video.